It's AM 650's The Law Show, a comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Well, good morning and welcome to The Law Show here on AM 650. A real delight to welcome back our guest from Lindsay Kenney, LLP, to the studio and to the program. Angela Thiel is a partner with LK Law. Christine Eilers, an associate, both working out of the Vancouver office. Hello to you both.
Nice to see you again, Sterling.
Hello.
Christine, nice to see you. And Angela, nice to hear you. Last time you were in studio with Christine, you had laryngitis, so you were here lending moral support and not a whole lot else to the conversation.
That's correct. Never get on a plane. All that bad air just gives you a cold.
Well, it's wonderful to hear your voice again. Tell us a little bit about Lindsay Kenney and how long you've been with that outfit.
Well, Lindsay Kenney is a firm that was started probably 35 years ago, and I've been there 25 years. And it's a general practice firm. We have an office in Langley as well. Mm-hmm. We have solicitors doing, real estate, conveyance, general business. We have a bunch of lawyers doing personal injury work, and then we have the family group, of which I'm a part of, but I also do wills and estates litigation and employment work as well. So we have, a full-service law firm in two different communities.
Right.
Been around a long time now.
Right. And Christine, you're a relative newcomer to LK. You are specializing in family law, but as Angela's already mentioned, the firm does a lot of other business. Why did you pick family law?
Yeah, well, I came from a family that dealt with family law issues myself, and it was always something that was of interest to me. And so I wanted to do it actually prior to entering law school. So it was always on my mind, and when I started at the firm, I basically started working with Angela pretty much right off the bat. And I've been there about 4 years now, and I do about 75-80% family law, and then the rest general litigation.
Ah, okay. Either the ice cream truck is in the neighborhood or Angela's phone just went off. Hopefully, a client can wait for a few minutes because we're on the radio here. Sir, please allow your lawyer to do her other job with me for a few minutes. We're going to talk family law, as we usually do with the two of you in studio, and the emphasis on the program today is going to be blended families. That's a pretty recent occurrence in Canadian society. I mean, this whole business of the blended family is relatively recent, the last 20 or 30 years. Angela, you're the senior member of this duo. When you were first starting out in family law 25 years ago, what was the percentage of blended family business you were doing then versus what you do now?
Oh, a lot less, particularly because people didn't realize the legal implications of parenting somebody else's children. And so often they didn't come and ask for advice. So you get them at the back end when they were suddenly being hit with a child support application and going, but those aren't my kids. Mm-hmm. I think now people are more alive to the fact that there are obligations they're taking on in a blended family, and they tend to get advice at the front end. And then the second thing is that because there's a lot of legal implications with respect to estate planning, mm-hmm. which I also do, they are starting to get advice at the front end, because what a lot of people don't know is the minute you marry, any wills you have are void, and any obligations in terms of it's like you've ripped up your will, but you haven't put anything else in place. So people are starting to know things like that and coming to see the lawyers a little sooner.
Right.
And then, of course, we have had changes in terms of there are more fathers who have 50-50 sharing of children's time. And what tends to happen on a remarriage is that there's often a lot of conflict that arises as people get used to a different framework of how their own children are going to be parented, and sometimes a lot of fear about, there's a strange man coming into my children's lives, or a strange woman. Leads to conflict if it's not managed properly.
Christine, you're the most recently out of school of the duo, so mm-hmm. I thought I would leave the definition, if there is one, in some law book somewhere, of a blended couple, a blended relationship.
Well, I don't know of any specific definition of the term, but certainly I think it refers to people bringing their families together, usually children from a prior relationship. Either one parent has children from a prior relationship, or both partners have children from a prior relationship.
Which is the more common? Which is when people are getting into these new relationships, do both parties typically bring children to the relationship, Christine? Or is there one and another single person trying to fit in?
I certainly don't have the statistics on it, but I mean, I would guess with the rate of divorce going up that there's a lot of people with both of them having children from a prior relationship. That's pretty common these days.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's correct, and also because fathers have relationships with their kids now after separation and divorce, where they're getting more time with their children. They may have 50-50, they may have a particular schedule, whereas 20 years ago the traditional schedule for a dad was every second weekend and a Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. So the impact of a remarriage of dad or mom wasn't quite as significant as it is now, where you've got a lot of 50-50 parenting schedules.
Right. Yeah. Now, these blended families, I guess, now, Christine, you just alluded to this. Given the facts surrounding the high rate of divorce, now we just know that that's roughly 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Yeah.
So with that in sort of as the premise, how do blended families work out from a success-failure point of view? Is there a percentage rate for them as well, or do they sort of fall into the same 50%? Half of them are going to work out, and the other half just aren't.
I think statistically it's actually a higher rate of failure for blended families.
Really?
Which makes some sense. There's a lot of pressures and a lot of conflict inherent in that setup to some extent. I mean, it can be wonderful, but and there's a lot of benefits that come from it. I come from a blended family to some extent. But at the same time, there's obviously external pressures. There may be litigation going on outside of the family. There's also different schedules that you're working with. One parent, I mean, both the parents may have their kids only 50% of the time, and you're trying to make that work with the other parents. And so there's a lot of pressures.
And what in addition to those that Christine has just identified, what are the other ones, Angela, that you're aware of? The whole trying to make it work. I mean, obviously it didn't work one time each. So now this is a take two for both parties. One could only assume take two, maybe more, but you know what I mean. It's a second attempt by both players in the arrangement, both of whom now have children.
Yeah. I mean, there's all the myths of the evil stepmother, the possessive children, I've certainly seen it in my own client load, the person that says, my husband's daughter would do anything to break us apart. And the husband's daughter is probably saying, to somebody else, my stepmother is such a cow, she always tries to tell my father what to do. And if you look at, ages and stages of the kids, it's going to make a difference. If you're becoming a step-parent of a 14-year-old girl, I think your statistics of failures, that marriage failing is going to be a little higher than if you're becoming a stepmom of a 5-year-old girl. A fellow taking on a family where the ex-husband, I mean, it's an awful analogy, but it's like a dog pissing on a tree. It's like this testosterone starts going, and you've got the ex-spouse, right, the ex-husband getting really possessive about the kids, and then sometimes you have the new spouse going, I'm going to fix this problem for you. And the same thing happens with women. I mean, the women get quite, a new spouse often is coming to me to say, I need you to, my husband's ex is just such a cow, and I need you to fix this. And I'm going, sorry, but I don't take instructions from you. I need to take instructions from the father of these children.
Right.
So it seems that, conflict arises because, there might have been a marriage that broke up, and certain compromises were made between those parents.
Right.
And sometimes because there was a lack of money to fight about things, and sometimes there was just, I don't want to have this conflict. So then, new dad comes in, for example, and often he's paying child support to mom back there.
Right.
He's saying, how much are you getting in child support? And she says, oh, I'm getting, $800. And he goes, well, your ex is driving a Porsche. How come you're only getting $800? Well, I really didn't have the money to fight him back then.
Right.
So now, somebody is being a champion, and they're gonna have that fight.
So they reopen some of those?
They reopen. And then we get custody reopening, because if I'm going to have to pay more money for child support, maybe I want to see my kids more often, so I change my child support regime. As we've said in previous shows, if you have your own children 40% of the time or more, you pay less child support.
A lot of what we're going to talk about here for the balance of this show, when we're talking family law and blended families, Christine, hinges on some changes made to family law in British Columbia in the past year. There's a new Family Law Act, barely a year old. What changes did it include to acknowledge the changing reality of blended families in our province?
Well, it has spelled out step-parents do have child support obligations if they've lived with and supported a child for a period of 1 year. It does also say that obligation will be looked at in the context of the lifestyle that the parties had together, as well as the duration of the relationship. So there are some factors. It's not an automatic. If you're a step-parent for a year, then you're going to be supporting this child until they're 19 years old. So it's not automatic like that. There's some factors.
This is kind of new, a bit of a revelation. I'm sure a lot of people are hearing this for the first time. This doesn't have anything to do with blended families at the moment. But if you are living with a person who has children, one or more, and you live with that person for a greater period than 1 year, and you're involved in some way in those child's daily lives, then if that relationship goes south, you have some responsibilities to those children that you lived with for more than a year, effective less than a year ago in the new law.
You certainly do. This is advice I give out frequently to my friends.
and actually, the new law is better than the old law. Yeah. You had those obligations before, but the new law spells out that the biological father has the primary obligation, and secondly spells out that you can limit the length of time that you're paying child support. So if you were, it used to be, you'd go in and the judge would just say, well, I'm ordering child support. And well, when does it end? Well, it'll end if you come back to court and say you want it to end and you give me a reason. Now you're looking at it in terms of saying, well, I want to go in and at the front end say, I was only with this woman for 4 years.
Right.
How about I only have to pay for 4 years? So I don't think we've seen any cases come out yet in terms of, a judge applying that. But that was never spelled out in the law before. That was left to judicial discretion.
Okay.
And the other thing is the natural parent having the primary obligation. So if you're giving advice to someone who's going into a blend, going to take on someone's kids,
as Christine does with her friends all the time.
Yeah. The first thing you ask is, what child support is she receiving from the natural father?
Yeah.
What income level is that based on, and what's your income level in comparison? So and it's not uncommon for someone to say, well, she's never pursued child support from the natural father, or she's pursued it, but he's only making $40,000 a year and I'm making $150,000.
Right. Or she doesn't know where he is.
Or she doesn't know where she is. I did a trial a few years back where the natural father, had kids everywhere. And very sad in the sense that this woman got pregnant because he told her that he'd had a vasectomy, and to the point where she thought she'd been date raped because he was adamant, oh no, it couldn't be mine.
Right.
Anyway, we do this trial, and now the step parent is saying, well, why should I have to pay? He had taken over this child. He'd said, don't bother trying to pursue him anymore. He's a deadbeat. You'll never get anything out of him. But now they're going, well, on the internet it looks like he's a very successful film producer, and she says, yeah, he's been saying that for probably the last 20 years.
Right.
So does the judge say, you've got to go find him and get the money from him? Or does he say, sir, you took on this obligation, and if you want, you can go find him and try to get some money to defray what you're having to pay. but we're not going to put her, in the position of she's not getting any support. And it was particularly it happens quite often, is people come in and they say, don't you worry your pretty little head about child support from that guy. I'll take care of you and these kids.
Ah.
And then, 10 years later, it's when they're broken up, it's, well, I didn't mean that.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing is you can't contract out of it. You can't contract out of this potential obligation. So at the front end, even if the parent with the kids says, oh, no, I'll never make you be responsible for my children,
right.
There's no agreement that you can sign that would bind her to that.
That would release you from those responsibilities.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
no marriage agreement or cohabitation agreement or anything can solve that problem for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're talking blended families on this episode of The Law Show with our guests from Lindsay Kenny, LLP. Angela Thiel and Christine Eilers are back with us. Always a pleasure to have these two in studio. Lots more still ahead on today's program. Stay with us.
This is AM 650's The Law Show. There's more of the show still ahead.